Welcome everybody to the Motorsports Country Club of Cincinnati. It's the Rotax Max Challenge US Trophy East here at this beautiful facility in Batavia, Ohio. Of course, back again live on Kart Chaser this weekend, yet again in Cincinnati. It's Saturday here for round number one of the US Trophy East, starting out with warm up and qualifying here live for everyone to view, free coverage on Kart Chaser. Then later on today, we'll go into Heat 1, Heat 2, and the pre-finals before ultimately going to the main event tomorrow. I'm joined today by Justin Prince here on the commentary. Justin, it's been a beautiful start to the morning in Cincinnati. How are we doing so far?
Well, doing good so far, especially when it comes to the top three. We just seen throughout the shots in the past couple minutes the Junior Max practice session. And so far, throughout the past few sessions, including yesterday, Jackson Deal, Darren Kidd, Jackson Gibson have been going back and forth in that class. Expect that to be a competitive class today when they go racing later today. But overall, when it comes to how we're feeling about the event today, very excited because this is a racetrack where some of the drivers, of course, had action with Scusa last week. That's going to help them with their experience here in terms of passing opportunities. And better yet, this is a track that, while it can be tricky to pass, can also provide a lot of slipstream opportunities for a racetrack like this one today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're talking about in the Junior Max category that we just saw wrapping up on track. Again, 19 carts, a very solid turnout this weekend. And I think you're going to see a lot of the draft effect when it comes to A, being able to set up a fast time and qualifying coming up, and B, the raceability of it. I think in that Junior Max package, you see about a 0.3 of a second advantage on the drafting side of things, and that really creates some fun finishing opportunities at this racetrack when it comes to the last couple lap battles down the main straightaway. So I'm excited for the racing later on today. Again, Heat 1, Heat 2 in the pre-finals, all behind the KC Premium member stream coming up later on. But as there's more kart pickup on the track, it gives us a time to run through the class structure again for this weekend. So we'll see the Junior Maxes on track. That was just concluded today, or in practice number one. The micro and the mini max category got combined for this weekend. So there's about, I believe, 13 mini max drivers and 4 micro drivers. So rather than running 2 separate categories, they are combined together. And then a return to the single category for Masters Max, who in the Rotax US Trophy West was combined with Rotax Senior. Now, though, the Masters Max category is standalone, and the Senior Max category as well, the headline division with 19 entries, should be a really fun one to watch throughout this weekend, Justin.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued in what's going to happen throughout the day today and throughout tomorrow, especially when it comes to these classes. And you already mentioned, especially when it comes to the last of those for the main one, the Senior Max. Diego Ramos has been one of the talks coming in for the crew coming in today. For example, he was a part of those who participated in final practice yesterday. It should be a fun day to keep an eye on which drivers maintain the speed they picked up yesterday, and better yet, who's going to be able to set themselves up perfectly for tomorrow when it's all essentially on the line, so to speak, right in the middle of the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the format is kind of unique in the sense that the finals are all going to be pretty early in the day. So this morning warm up, which normally wouldn't be overly representative, it might not be representative of what it is later in the day, what the track is going to be pretty relatively similar to what some of the classes we'll see in the final tomorrow in terms of track temp and in terms of how the rubber gets laid down early on in the day. So that could be interesting to watch. And now on the track right now is the Masters Max category. And so, again, this is really, to me, one of the coolest parts of this weekend in the sense that the Masters category, it's gotten a few entries this weekend, and a few of them that I think are going to be really competitive throughout the weekend. You have John Bonanno, the former U.S. Team USA member, and really one of the most decorated Masters drivers in the last 3 to 4 years. Made an appearance in Bahrain last year and has been very quick. There's Laurencio Mardan, Mr. Techno himself, making an appearance here in Cincinnati for Rotax. That is kind of unique for him. We haven't seen him in a ton of Rotax events in the past, but certainly a lot of good racing to be expected from him as well. Another couple guys that could be notable this weekend: John Todd, Dallas Hoff, as well as Ray Banach, all have shown a lot of good pace, but John Bonanno currently leading the way after only one lap.
Yeah, I was keeping an eye on the times yesterday to that. Between Martin and Bonanno, they were both separated in the final session yesterday by just 21 100ths. And how close they were able to put up times on the racetrack for the course of about 13 laps or so. So I'm honestly expecting it to be a close battle amongst those two at the very least, because those two, yet again, along with Banach, are making it a very tightly contested battle at the top of the practice charts. It's going to be one of those races, though, too, where we've seen this last week here at the Motorsports Country Club of Cincinnati, where the Masters class essentially had the chance for a couple drivers to break away and then battle aggressively for said race win. The question's going to be, how will the race finish go? We've seen last time out here on Kart Chaser at the racetrack that bit of contact to turn one for the race leaders in their respective final. How will things go here today in Rotax East US Trophy East competition, should say? That's obviously going to be a different story, but it's also going to be one to keep an eye on in case there is anything in terms of a breakaway today in the racing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it comes down to really setting up your slipstream. The race we saw last weekend with James Overbeck closing down Stephen Miller is a perfect encapsulation of this. When it comes to the last straightaway, it's a very, very long straightaway in karting terms, and it allows you the chance to gain, again, roughly 2 to 3 tenths in draft on that straightaway alone in the KA categories. In the Rotax junior and senior, you're probably going to see closer to just 1 to 2 tenths, but you can gain so much time in that draft, and a good run out of this final corner that you see on the screen now, out of the final hairpin, gives you a great slingshot out of what is technically the final corner in that dog leg and down the main straightaway. So again, the racing has been phenomenal at this track since they expanded it, really in general, but especially the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of good racing around this place. And I think that, again, it's all down to how you set up that draft on the last lap and how well you get a good run out of that last corner as to how it's going to race for you later on in the day.
And I find it intriguing where, over the course of what we've seen in the past couple weeks in total, just the opportunities that are going to be presenting itself, I think today, especially in general, turn 4 is going to be an interesting time for passing opportunities. But interesting enough, turn 11 was where a lot of drivers seem to have figured out, okay, this is where you have to be brave if you want to set up passes. That's that run up through sector 3, a sharp left-hander just after the corner complex you see here through turn 14 onward. Essentially, this corner right here, we've seen a lot of drivers say, I'm going to sling it to the left side. If it sticks, it sticks, to be able to try and make the pass for positions. Last time we were here at the racetrack. And I think that's going to be where a lot of people may see chances yet again today, because it is pretty effective if you can get that pass done before turn 12. Otherwise, you're left for potential contact to try and wrap around the inside line here.
Yeah, and turn 12, the thing is, turn 12 is a much easier corner to defend, in my opinion, when it comes to heavy under braking. You can kind of send it, and if you overshoot it, you still end up on the inside for turn 13 and that hairpin. So you can kind of catch them off guard a little bit with the late move into the turn 11 sweeper, and also you can kind of set up a crossover if they overrun it as well. So there's a few different options with turn 11. I think as well, the long run down the hill, there's really a lot longer than you might think just from watching our broadcast or just from seeing the races, but it turns into a pretty noticeable straightaway down through this section right here, and that obviously will create more drafting opportunities later on. And again, I mean, this track, a lot of overtaking opportunities. It's not the easiest track to overtake at because of the amount of time that you lose in certain places making it overtake, and also because of the difficulty in trying to overcome defensive driving. But certainly, I think that there's many different places, especially in the second half of this course, that are pretty good overtaking opportunities. Even the turn 9 kink that you'll see a lot of drivers kind of pop out and make passes there. So lots of overtaking opportunities, but right here the sweeper is a really good one, like you mentioned, Justin.
Yeah, especially in terms of the inside curve, as you talked about, but don't be surprised if we see drivers rub fenders, so to speak, or rub the sides of the go-karts in that section, I think. So it's going to be advantageous if, in general, you get the good feel for this corner, and hence why this practice is so important. You keep an eye on one of these groups, for example. See, even just the minute details of lines. You don't stake that curbing. You've seen already in the midst of that quarter complex, the Kart in chase on that screen was able to close up an extra half, maybe a quarter cart length rather, to be able to close up compared to some of the others. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on during the race itself to potentially set up those opportunities for that draft section you mentioned down the front stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's all in the finer details here. When you start getting down to the last 10th or so, like we saw in the senior max practice at the end of the day yesterday, the top 4 drivers all within a 10th of a second, that's where you can find just those little few hundreds all in the line and in the way you place your kart through this last section. It is one of the more challenging sections to drive in all of karting, because how you are able to carry speed in the first hairpin and roll the speed through, and how you set up the line on exit directly impacts the amount of speed you're able to carry onto the straightaway. So you might see the last corner exit and think, okay, well, this is just where the run starts, but it really all starts 2 to 3 corners earlier with how you're able to carry that momentum and how you place your go-karts. So a lot of important characteristics here on the track. But as we end up the session, a look at the top of this Masters Max category. Laurencio Mardan puts a 10th on Ray Banach and P1, and then John Bonanno in 3rd, only a 10th and a half back. So these top 3, as we saw yesterday, continuing to put distance on the rest of the field so far in warm-up.
And I think that sets precedent for what we're going to see during the race itself so far. It's just going to come down to how they race each other, and especially, I think, between how they position themselves, better yet, how the package itself plays out during the race itself. That's going to be what really separates things up towards the front. Both Amato did get the top 4 with Chris McGinley. That's going to be also an interesting battle for the 4th spot, I think, during the racing itself throughout the weekend, with how they were within a couple tenths on their practice charts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's kind of 2 separate battles that are worth watching. Like you mentioned, the battle for 1st between Banach, Mardan, and Bonanno, and then the battle for 4th is pretty tight as well, at least between Amato and Chris McGinley. So I think that there are a lot of storylines in this Masters Max category, but really, in general, this whole weekend, every single category has some form of characteristic that makes it really exciting. I think the mini max category is going to be interesting. Jack Kotowski in the micro as well should be pretty quick, but both of those guys will have between the mini max category with all the different national level drivers coming into town for this weekend, the micro max category with Jack Kotowski looking to secure a win, and then also the outstanding battle we're set to see in senior max. There's a lot of good racing coming up later on today, but again, just getting started here in Cincinnati with the morning warm-up. We're going to take a quick word from our partners, and we'll be back to cover the final 2 classes here in warm-up.
This is Henry. Henry feels sad. Henry feels sad because it's time for his next big race and his go-kart is in bits. Henry doesn't know that Acceleration Kart Racing is the United States' #1 shop for all of your karting equipment needs. Henry also doesn't know that Acceleration Kart Racing can deliver anything from tires to race suits and even wheels directly to your front door or to the racetrack itself, quickly and efficiently, with tech support available 6 days a week. Poor Henry doesn't even know that Acceleration Kart Racing offers free shipping to mainland USA on selected product if you spend $200 or more. Do yourself a favor Go to accelerationkarting.com and make sure that you are never left stuck on the pre-grid with Henry. Be smart and don't be like Henry.
Are you looking for an advantage in your competition? Well, KartPlex has done the hard work for you. We've travelled to your racetracks to give you the inside knowledge. So what does KartPlex offer? We've got drone footage that captures the racing lines, visual markers for your braking points, acceleration zones, and the best overtake opportunities on your racetrack. Pedal cam to show you where to brake and when to accelerate, and 360-degree footage to make sure you don't miss any parts on the racetrack. We've covered 13 racetracks in the United States, and Australia, you're up next. So visit kartplex.com to get your track information.
Are you ready to get behind the wheel? From Formula One to NASCAR and IndyCar, all the pros start here. For more information, check us out online at mcckarting.com or call us and go racing today.
Welcome back here to the Motorsports Country Club of Cincinnati. On the track right now is the Micro and Mini Max categories. Again, if you weren't with us at the top of the show, we mentioned that those two categories will be merged together this weekend. And again, there are a lot of key storylines in this one as we get set to go. There's a returning national winner in Ashton Woon, coming off the back of a dominant performance at the Scusa Spring Nationals. There is Nico Katowski, who's been up at the front of the field all the way throughout his season. Enzo De Janeiro, another key face coming back in after a brilliant run through the field in one of his finals last weekend. And then also a couple of the younger guys making the move up to Mini as well. Lucas Tarango, off the back of a dominant performance at the U.S. Trophy West, is making the move up to Mini Max, as is Connor Leipka as well. So Justin, as we get set to go for this practice, I mean, what other things are you looking at when it comes to this micro mini field?
Well, you mentioned Tarango in the west side in particular. Remember, was one of the front runners in the racing there before getting turned around in the battle for the race lead in Grand Junction, Colorado. So I think that's going to be something where, obviously on the east side, you wanted to bounce back quickly. It's from the spin around like that. Still a great finish for Lucas in that race, but it's still something that's got to be the back of the mind after some of the aggression in that respective race, trying to pass in the S's essentially. But also to keep an eye on here today is going to be the second on the board right now in Rancio Ferreira, who is currently within a couple hundreds, within a couple 10 should say now, of Woon. Led the way in the final sessions yesterday. That 164 kart also looking very quick so far. Also with a fair amount of experience behind them as well in their respective karts. We'll see how things go today, I think, for this class.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is a pretty stacked field. Only 10, in the Minimax category between the minis and then 3 in micro. But the level of competition of mini is really impressive for this field. You have Nico Katowski, Ashton Woon, and Enzo De Janeiro. That's 3 of your 5 or 6 most decorated mini drivers so far this season, all running in this race. And then you will add in Lorenzo Varela, who has been very impressive so far this weekend, as well as Holden Myers, Jeremy St. Clair here as well in the 197. There's a lot of fast drivers in this field. And again, I'm intrigued to see how Leipka and Tarango do. I know Leifka's run a little bit of the mini category throughout the rest of the season when it comes to running on the Swift side of things on the IME package. But for Rotax, I believe this is his first endeavor on the Minimax package. And for Tarango, I know it is his first Rotax Minimax start. So again, guys moving up, but ultimately this should be a very fun field. As right now, Nico Katowski has the measure on Ashton Woon, which is not something that people were able to say very often last weekend. As Woon was absolutely dominant, loves this track, was very impressive, and I think in his first outing in a Rotax package, I think this is going to be intriguing to watch for sure.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the amount of drivers in that field, as you said. But I think really it's going to be a proving ground for many of the others, trying to get a feel of how are they going to race on the racetrack today? How are they going to brace each other for those new to the class? How are they going to adapt in terms of the racetrack? I think drivers like Tarango, I think, can adapt to that. But it's just going to be down to today. How do these drivers respond to the circuit and amongst itself as they prepare for the racetrack? That's going to be the fun part, I think, for today.
Yeah, absolutely. And also too, like how this track races and how it races in a mini category compared to one like a senior is is pretty different because you lose out on some of the overtaking opportunities in the back section where you don't quite have as much of a braking zone, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to make those passes. But in return, the draft effect here absolutely enormous in the cadet categories. I mean, we saw last week probably half a second worth of lap time to be found. And more importantly, in the passing zones, this run here up through turns 2 and 3, up into turn number 4 is exactly where you will see a lot more overtaking and a lot more of that draft effect coming into play in the mini side of things, where you can get a better run. There's more time to make that run, and the carts kind of bunch together a bit more. And we saw a chaotic final on the mini side of things last week, and a lot of passes for the lead, and a lot of them coming right there. And so you kind of lose out on the aggressive sins. You don't get quite as much of that because of the shortened braking zone, but what you do get is some really good drafting. And pretty much every corner on this track, you can see draft related passes in the mini side of things.
And that's going to be an exciting one, I think, in terms of the class overall, though, with that draft effect. It's just going to be how do you handle it as the checker flag, I think, is now out for the session here. And just like that, Barrera ended up at the top of the board. Kowalski, should I say, and Woon amongst those tightly wound up in the respective pack, though. Draft was big for the 164, up 3/10 over everybody else to close out the session.
Yeah, up 3/10. 3/10 is a pretty big margin here in the mini max category. Rinko Varela again, a 1 minute .445. That is a very quick time. On the micro side of things, Jack Katowski with a 103.787 is P1 ahead of Cole Vetter, Anthony Mazzucolo, as well as Slate Harrell, excuse me. Those were your 3 drivers in the micro max practice in order. But Lorenko Varela at the top of the field in mini max. And again, 3/10 clear of Katowski, 4/10 clear of Woon, and 6/10 clear of Holden Myers and Lucas Tarango. So intriguing practice here in micro, but we get set for the biggest class on the weekend, Senior Max. Again, this one should be a barn burner, Justin. There's a lot of names that you might be familiar with, that everyone in general is going to be, or will likely have some idea of based off of North American karting, a stout field to be exact, with Diego Ramos, Oliver Hodgson, Gavin Bailiff, and more getting set to do battle here today and tomorrow. And again, I mean, we look back at practice yesterday, the top 4 ending up within a 1/10 of a second of each other. Ramos, Hodgson, we saw Zachary Clement DeMello up there as well. And I mean, I think this class is set up to be very, very fun to watch this weekend.
And a lot of the names you just mentioned, too, were amongst your top 5, top 10 just a week ago in SCUSA competition. So they're expected to really keep that standard going. Cooper O'Clair in particular comes to mind as well to keep an eye on because of some of the speed showcased last time as one of the top drivers in terms of some of the times there. So I think it's going to be basically, if you make a mistake, it's going to be a bad day. If it's going to be a good day for you, you have to be able to beat the best of the best. As generic as that may sound, that is literally the case. You're talking about some of the best in the country if you want to win in this next class for practice rotations.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of important positioning and qualifying, because how you qualify at this track, who you put yourself around when you get to the to the heat races and the pre-finals later on in the day, will directly impact kind of where you're at. You see it all the time where guys qualify sort of midway through the field towards the back of the field, and it is possible to overtake here. There are a lot of passing zones, as we've mentioned earlier on in the broadcast, but it can be difficult, and you get yourself set up on the wrong foot, and it can really spiral out of control. There's a look at the grid. You can see Wes Gunwer walking down as well. The Fox and Sons boys getting set to do battle here this weekend. Cooper O'Clair, like you mentioned, should be one to watch as well. And how about Theo Kakati? I mean, we've seen him be very, very quick on the west side. More recently on the KA package a couple weeks ago at Newcastle was impressive as well. So, I mean, again, a lot of guys that should have good pace this weekend. Chris Harrower as well, one to mention, as in his J3 competition, Kart. These guys really in the senior max category, you kind of get the best of the best. You get the best drivers, you get the teams really kind of putting everything they have into this one, and I think we're going to see a lot of good racing from this category this weekend as they get suited up for their warm-up here in a few minutes.
I'm glad you mentioned Kakati, because that was a driver who outright near dominated in Colorado with some of the battling going on. Top 10 last year in the RMC Grand Finals as a driver, and a top 30 runner in the International Trophy back in 2022. I think Kakati might be one of the dark horses, so to speak, for the field in terms of the east side, at least, because of some of that experience from the west, and in turn showing what he can do out on the west coast and out in the mountaintops of Colorado in particular to close out the round. Kakati's a very fast driver and is able to get rhythm pretty quickly. And it's going to be, I think, once the racing session gets together for the practice, should say, going to be make or break a bit for Kakati and for a couple of the others to see what they can do here now in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, Kakati should be one to watch. I think Oliver Hodgson, kind of the main guy for J3 as well. We saw him be one of those top 4 drivers in practice yesterday. And Hodgson, again, a guy with a lot of experience, a lot of different packages that he's been fast on. You give him an engine, you give him a kart, he will be up at the front of the field. But some of these other guys in Rotax, I think Gavin Bailiff is, of course, the hometown kid, the kid who's the track is literally in his backyard, so to speak, making the move back to the single speed side of things, back to his roots, so to speak. He has been very quick on the package as well this weekend. And I think, again, in general, when you get to the racecraft side of things, you have 7 or 8 guys that have been fast enough to be up at the front of the field all weekend long. You put him in a blender for the race, that's where I think it's going to be a bit different than what we might have seen in practice. As again, they're getting set to go for the start of their day. We'll go ahead and throw the schedule back up on here again one more time so you can see what the day schedule looks like. Again, getting started out today in the warm-up session. We've already seen 3 of the 4 classes go out for warm-up between Micro Max and Mini Max, the combined category, Junior Max, as well as Masters Max, and now we get into the Senior Max side of things for the last warm-up before we go into qualifying. That will be all on the free coverage, and then you get to the KC Premium coverage, which is Heat 1, Heat 2, and the pre-finals today, running all the way through the afternoon into about 5 o'clock this evening, and then tomorrow we get set up bright and early, same time at 9 a.m. in the morning to do warm-ups, and then straight into the main events for all of these categories.
It's a busy day overall for the Saturday, at least, you have to say, with everything you have to consider. But overall, you have to remember those heats and pre-finals going to be very critical, I think, for starting position, to be able to get it done right, to be better yet, to have the track position for the morning races on Sunday. Because remember, qualifying is great to be able to secure the position for your heats. But we talked it was talked about a little bit in Colorado. It really comes down to how you do in the heats too, to be able to secure that starting position for the final for the Sunday.
Yeah, and again, you have a lot of time to kind of work out your differences. Sort of a more traditional one final race form, as you see a lot of karts going fast. Actually, in the grid, we have contact on the grid there between the 312 and the 318. That was very sketchy indeed. Is again, this is kind of something that happens here when you have a longer warm-up session. Guys can wait to go out. Other guys trying to go as quickly as they can, and we just saw some of the negative effects here. A lot of speed being carried through the pit lane. And so it looks like the J3 guys are going to wait to go out, and the rest of the field continuing to cycle through. There's a look at Gavin Bailiff coming through turn 6 in his all-black TKG suit and kart. The kit looking very good for Bailiff, and you can see the rest of the field trickling through. As we get them through turns 11 and 12 down through the sweeper, and you can see, again, this senior max category, 19 karts this weekend. We saw a lot of good pace yesterday from Diego Ramos and from really the top 5 all close together. And as you come down the main straightaway again, we'll start to see who can set the benchmark. We see Ben Hernandez kind of leading that group up at the front of the field. He's been a guy in his move up to senior, has been very quick at points on the LN kart. You can see ZCD is right there as well in tow in the 327 machine. Adam Lorenko aboard his Fox and Sean's kart should be one that will be very fast as well. And you go down through the list again. Ben Lida back on the two-stroke side of things as well. It's been a little bit since we've seen him running something like a Rotax package. And then you go down through the list as well. Yashram Ball out here. Austin Olds for the MPG Motorsports team in his rookie senior season back in the Rotax platform. And you get the 2 PSL machines. You have Timothy Pernod as well as Diego Ramos on your screen right now coming through turn number 6.
And again, a great chance to be able to see teammates work together, try and get a flow of things, try and see how are we going to work together to be able to race as a grouping here today rather than as enemies, so to speak. And we've seen a lot of times so far this year, drivers try and group together as teammates so they can break away, try and settle in the tempo as a group, and then dictate the race then amongst themselves here. So Diego Ramos straight to the top of the board in the session, by the way, up by 2/10 as a result here. So we'll see how things play out as this session now goes. Ramos the lead kart in this respective group.
Yeah, and how about it for Timothy Pernod, too? We saw yesterday he was extremely quick in practice. A guy that honestly has had a lot of good races over the last year or so on the Rotax side of things. Very quick in his own right. But we see now Ramos kind of giving him a tour around the Cincinnati track, a track that Ramos has been pretty good at in recent memory. So Diego leading his teammate through the final couple corners, down the main straightaway. Adam Lorenko just had a lap time to go within 1/10 of what Ramos did on his second lap. We'll see what Ramos does down this as we pick up Oliver Hodgson as Ramos and Pernod go half a second clear of the field on their second lap. We'll see what Hodgson and this field and this group of J3 competition karts do as Hodgson sets a 56.56 for his second lap, about 4/10 off the pace of Diego Ramos.
Keeping an eye on some of these other cards as they go around here. 354 you've seen on screen, for example, I believe. But right now, just keeping an eye on the flow of things. Pernod seems to be very quick in that air pack. We kept an eye on. We already touched upon this. He was a signing picked up by the respective team for Pixel Art last year here after being a provincial champion out in Canada and earning multiple different podiums at the National Karting Championships out in Canada. That's going to be one of your top cards to keep an eye on, I think, as a grouping, as one of the young drivers rising up to the ranks today. Some of these other drivers starting to find some rhythm. Hodgson on his own is setting a very strong amount of pace, being able to break away from essentially everybody else in the backdrop there you're already seeing in the midst of this practice session. Hodgson, if you give him the draft, might be able to pounce pretty quickly. here today.
Yeah, Hodgson's going quick. He's just set at 56.6 by himself. But again, Diego Ramos really quick, leading Pernod through pretty much every corner. And you can see the gap that Hodgson has pulled is not insignificant. As there's a look at Gavin Bailiff, who has struggled so far in the session of 56.9. He's 8/10 off of the pace being set by Ramos. So Ramos and Pernod had one really good lap that has put them pretty well clear of the field. But Hodgson, Olds, and ZCD all running pretty competitive pace as Bailiff again rounds turn 6, heads down through the S's up towards turn number 9. And you can see he's kind of lost touch with that group ahead of him, the likes of Zachary Clement and Mello, as well as Aiden Lorenko, as Aiden Fox on the Fox and Sons machine just dropped his name up into the top 5 with a 56.5. And at the front of the field, Diego Ramos just had an absolute burner on his 4th lap of 55.883. That's the fastest we've seen all weekend, I believe. And it's a 10.5 clear of Pernod. It's 4/10 clear of the next closest driver in Oliver Hodgson.
I think that kind of states how much those two karts up at the very top of your pylon have things tuned up for today to be able to get things ready to go for this big race time action for this weekend. So for a lot of the others, need to find a little pace. Bailiff in particular, you mentioned it being a home racetrack essentially for that family. That's going to be an interesting one to see how much they pick up already. Some of the drivers as far as a second off amongst the top 10. That's a pretty sizable spread in the early going, even for a practice session in theory.
Yeah, I mean, this has been kind of a spread out session like you mentioned. And I really think like Diego Ramos's pace that we're seeing is very ominous. Even if he's not able to break away from the field, to be able to consistently run 2 to 3 tenths quicker on just about any hot lap that he's done is super impressive. One thing that's interesting to note on both him and Pernod is that last lap through, they slowed down about 5 seconds, which could be one of two things. It could be they're cooling down the tires to maybe do one more fast lap and kind of test that out to see how much the tires get back up into temperature, or it could just simply be them trying to clear out space on the racetrack to give themselves one clear run at their next lap. But either way, Ramos and Pernod have been the class of the field, and there we go. So Ramos, Pernod, one cool down lap, and then another really fast lap, a 55.7 for Diego that time through. So Diego Ramos setting the pace early so far in Senior Max.
Yeah, rapid pace for Ramos. Mind you, a 4-time Brazilian kart champion and Brazil Cup kart champion, showing why he's one of his team's top drivers right now. But just about the final couple seconds of this practice session here at the moment, it's gotten here to where the two teammates have just about reeled in other karts here with what they've been able to do on the racetrack as a result of how things have gone this session. But the main thing you mentioned about trying to get a cool down and then a warm up to see how the hot lap time may go down here. The interesting thing is also just getting a feel of how the pack's going to be, how big the draft's going to be. All that's going to come into play for how to know what the qualifying is going to end up being like, and better yet, how the race conditions are about to be with the checker flag now waving in this practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the qualifying, being able to set up the draft is going to be vital, especially when you get to the lower powered categories. And when you get to the Senior Max side of things, understanding the raceability of this place and where you can effectively make passes will be so important. And of course, a lot of the guys do have experience here, whether it be last weekend or at another time, depending on kind of where they have been. But for a couple guys in particular, it is a new track for them. I don't believe Timothy Pernod has ever been to the Motorsports Country Club of Cincinnati before, at least in recent years, certainly not since we've seen him stateside. And so I think that will be something for him to get used to. And as well as that, a lot of the other guys like Cooper Auclair only racing here once or twice on a different engine platform. And there's some subtle differences on the Rotax side of things, understanding the power band on the low end that kind of changed your racecraft just a little bit when it comes to what's a good pass to make versus when you shouldn't send it. So these are all things that the drivers will have talked about. They're all things that kind of play into the mind and the decision making. But one thing that is clear from this first practice, just how quick Diego Ramos and Timothy Pernod were. So to wrap up warm-up, Diego Ramos, a 55.783. He won in the session by 2.5 tenths over his teammate Timothy Pernod. Oliver Hodgson has some pace to find, did not do a single lap in the draft. He ends up third, Austin Olds fourth, and Aiden Fox rounds out your top 5. As you go further down as well, Aiden Marenko, Wesley Gunler, Zach Clemendamello, Ben Hernandez, and Cooper Auclair all in the top 10, but all with a lot of pace to find. I mean, we're talking 7 to 8 tenths between Ramos and P1 and that grouping from about 6 down to the 10th place spot. Gavin Bailiff, a very rough session in 11th, upwards of a second off the pace. Chris Harrower, Yash Rempel, Kai Brumman Facino, and Ben Lida rounding out your top 15 in the Senior Max categories. There's about 4 more guys down further on outside the top 15. Only 2 actually that set representative lap times, and Nick Mercer and Brian Bolos. And then 2 guys did not set a single lap time, and that was Dio Kakati as well as Boyadiz. So 19 drivers in Senior Max. We saw 17 of them, and we saw Diego Ramos up at the front of the field to wrap up warm-up as we get set to go into qualifying in about 9 minutes time, Justin.
And the qualifying going to be very critical. We talked about track position being king as a result of how things can be at this racetrack, with how difficult it can be in the pack to make the passes here today. You better be able to dial yourself in. Based on the amount of time we've seen drivers turn laps, you only have like about 4, maybe 5, 6 laps to get a proper lap in to be able to try and set the top time throughout your class, depending on said class. You better be ready for when this qualifying gets ready to go in the next few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've got qualifying coming up again. We'll take a look at the schedule here to give you a very good indication of what the rest of the day is going to look like. But this is going to be a fast-paced qualifying, 8 minutes in distance. So we're kind of looking forward to that one in about 8 minutes time. At 10 o'clock, we'll release the grid for qualifying. But before we get there, let's hear a word from some of our partners.
Brandon, why are there all these charges for just over $200 from Acceleration Kart Racing's website?
That's because AKR gives you free shipping on orders of $200 or more within the continental US.
Okay, but I thought you were just getting a pair of gloves. That's what, 70 bucks?
But if I'm getting a new pair of gloves, I might as well get a new pair of shoes to match. And then on top of that, I'll get a neck brace because with the shipping, it's basically free.
Yeah, I do not think the math checks out on that.
Everything you need, all in one place and shipped to your door for free for orders of $200 or more. Exclusions apply. Spend responsibly. Shop AKR.com.
I'm David Serra, 18-time Australian karting champion, and we're launching KartPlex. KartPlex is an advanced digital training program that helps the driver who's just starting out in the sport all the way to the driver looking to win a national championship. In this program, you're going to be learning about how to find the ideal racing line and what an apex is, braking and throttle markers, wet weather racing lines, and how to overtake other competitors. We target how to brake in the wet weather, and we look on the mental side of kart racing as well with our mental skills coach. At the completion of this program, you'll be lighting up purple sectors in qualifying, know when to defend on the opening laps, and how to pressure your opposition into mistakes. We teach you the tools to be resilient and how to get in the right frame of mind before a race. We look to complete the whole package by getting a strong mindset, a driving style to suit all conditions, strategizing your race, and getting the last 1% from your team. We'll teach you how to win the final lap of a race, driving the wet like Max Verstappen, and creating the perfect bubble for yourself to mentally be in the zone. To find out more, click the link below.
Are you ready to get behind the wheel? From Formula One to NASCAR and IndyCar, all the pros start here. For more information, check us out online at mcckarting.com or call us and go racing today.
Maryland USA, a top-level performance team with unmatched hospitality. offering a full-service driver development program with year-round testing available in Miami, Florida, and the official North America racing team of Parolin Racing Chassis. Chassis and parts available at ParolinUSA.com.
Taking a look as karts currently work their way around the racetrack as they prepare for the start and are working to the start of qualifying. Junior Max underway for their qualifying session here at Emory. And we've seen already the top three in the practice sessions. Jackson Gibson, Jackson Deal, Darren Kidd going back and forth. Let's see what they do here in qualifying now that the times come into major precedence here. First time starting to cycle on through. Davin Roberts, top of the board. Jackson Deal, top of the board now. The 294 kart, 57.711 to start things off for the qualifying session. Roberts able to jump up significantly compared to some of the practice times from earlier on. He was in as far as the bottom half of the top 10 throughout some of the sessions. Kidd and others need to pick up tempo here to be able to see if they can move up the pylon and be able to get up to where Deal is here as they come around for the second time around this time. Second time around, Lanton Booher moving to the top of the board. Roberts also bumping up on the racetrack. Keeping an eye on some of the other karts as they zip around the 242 amongst those on picture. As we try and see where the car times fly around. Nick Eggleston has picked up significant time to get to the 57.3s as well. Remember, usually the optimal window picking up about next time by for these times for the karts here today. Darren Kidd, amongst those who needs to bump up a fair bit, he's currently stuck in the 8th position and is the lead driver for a respective draft pack right now, compared to being in the heart of some of the packs earlier on in the sessions. Coming around to the final 4 minutes or so in the qualifying session, this upcoming time by for some of these drivers here on the racetrack. Where do the times now fly? We'll see. No changes up towards the front except for Caleb Tartar jumping up a fair bit. Tartar, 57.196, and we have a trouble in turn 2.
Yeah, it looks like a kart's off in turn number 2 there, Justin, and unfortunate for them. Again, with this qualifying session, there's enough time to where you can go off, you could have an issue like that and still recover, but if they're in the barriers that they have damaged their go-kart, that will be all she wrote for this session. But back to the on-track action, back to the front of the field. Caleb Tartar with the MPG Motorsports machine going absolutely rapidly so far. 57.196 puts him ahead of his teammate Landon Buer. Nick Eggleston, a star from the US Trophy West Series, is in the 3rd spot, and then it's Davin Roberts in the 4th spot. Jackson Deal down in 5th, a little bit surprising after the pace he's shown all weekend long. But again, still 3 minutes and change to try to find that one lap that you need to put it up at the front of the field here.
Yeah, 5th, 6th, and 7th were your basically your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place runners all throughout the previous sessions. Well, that kind of emphasizes one thing, right? You can always see practice pace, practice pace, practice pace, but when it comes to qualifying the racing itself, it's a whole different deal, and it's also potentially, in some cases, people not wanting to show their full hand, so to speak, in terms of what speed they have in their kart compared to what they actually do have when it's time to be able to put up the speed for qualifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that like a lot of the differences could be down to just simply running new tires at different points on the weekend. I mean, these Mojos do have a bit of fall off over the course of their life. And so if you run new tires 2 or 3 times during practice, you're going to have an advantage over those that don't put on new tires. So I think that that's something to keep an eye on, something to keep in mind, because this is the first time all weekend that we know for sure they are completely even on their sets of tires. So Caleb Tarter, again, has been very impressive so far this year, running in the junior categories, regardless of where that is at. And now we're seeing it kind of come to fruition here in qualifying. Just did a cool down lap, I believe, to kind of give himself a little bit of extra space. And you can see now coming down the main straightaway again, that's Landon Buer coming to the start-finish line, and he's going to get a good draft on this lap. We'll see if it's anywhere near enough. No, he's stuck behind the 240. That is Alex Miller that he's not able to improve on. You can see Davin Roberts here in the background. He's got some clear track to work into and might get a good draft on this lap.
And they're running out of time to get the good laps here. We're coming up already towards the final minute of the session right now. So if you have anything left in the tank, you better push right now, or else you're starting in the hornet's nest, so to speak, as I like to call it. Anything around 4/5 on backish, that's expected to be very hectic from the get-go and going to be very difficult to completely separate yourself from once the race gets underway in of itself later on today. So you have to find something. And some of these drivers in this draft train need to find that something and quick.
Yeah, absolutely. If they don't find the draft, or if they don't find the pace quick, they will be in a tough situation. Again, you do have a lot of time when it comes to 2 heats and a pre-final to find the extra pace and to make your way up through the field. But starting out up at the front of the field, avoiding any sort of chaos at the start is a huge advantage. And for the likes of Caleb Tarter and Landon Buer and the MPG Motorsports machines, a front row lockout sounds really good. For a lot of these guys as well, though, it could be a case where they kind of run through the good of the tires. So if you didn't get that lap early in the session, you are not going to be able to improve that much. And as you go down through the field as well, some big names back through the field. Derek Wargo down in 13th, Kai Mars in 12th, home track kid Homer Himman in the 14th spot. And, I mean, just through the rest of the list, there's a lot of guys that I don't think will be too happy with their qualifying. But as they hit the checkered flag this lap around, one guy that does look to be happy is Caleb Tarter.
Yeah, and a big bump up for the practice sessions around the 6-7 spots during that session. Does anybody change times here? There is a couple. Oh, Jackson Deal got within 44 100ths of him, but Tarter does hold on for now.
Yeah, Caleb Tarter, that lap on lap 3, that was the money lap. And if you look down the list, Jackson Deal, the only guy in the top 5 to set his best lap on the last lap, which I think bodes well for him when it comes to race time. But right now, it's the MPG Motorsports 1, 2, 3 at the flag. Caleb Tarter, Jackson Deal, Landon Buer, all put together phenomenal qualifying efforts. Then you go back, Nick Eccleston in 4th, the top 5 within 0.2 of a second with Davin Roberts in that 5th spot. And down through the rest of the list, Jackson Gibson, Shotaro Sunakawa, Mason Kuhn, Darren Kidd, and Alex Miller round out your top 10. Further back is Ryan Mort, Kai Mars in the 12th spot alongside Derek Wargo in 13th, Homer Heeman in 14th, and Shane Stern in the 15th spot. And further down the list, you get down to Adam Sena, Matty Grace, Paulie Hart, who had a mechanical issue early on in the session, and Xander Malatesta in the 19th and final spot, another driver that had some kind of massive issue. So that wraps up your Junior Max field. But coming up next, it's qualifying for Masters Max.
Hey guys, it's Dave here from Kart Class. We're at MCC, the Motorsports Country Club of Cincinnati. We're here to show you guys the fastest way to drive this almost 1 mile circuit. It offers both fast sweeping corners, some fast chicanes, and a technical switchback that leads onto a long main straight. Let's find out where to brake, where to accelerate, and where the best places to overtake. So let's get stuck into it.
So as we start our lap at MCC, the Motorsports Country Club of Cincinnati, drivers want to approach turn 1 basically flat out, barring the shifter category. Turn 2 presents the first real overtaking opportunity on the track. This is a light lock of the brakes, but drivers can get up the inside. The fastest approach is take a later apex, and that sets you up to get into the back straight nice and quickly. Turn 3 is flat out. As we make our way down the back straight, this presents another opportunity to overtake our competitors. Less braking is required here because the corner opens up a lot more than turn 2. On the exit of turn 4, allow the kart to flow to the edge of the track. You can use that outside curbing. Now there's two different approaches the driver's going to take in turn 5, the right hand 180 degree switchback. Our low performance categories want to open up the entry where X30 and shifter can attack the inside apex a lot more aggressively. The reason for this is they've got a lot more horsepower to get out of that corner nice and quickly. A little chirp of the brakes is still required into this corner, but drivers want to get on the gas a little bit earlier than that middle of the apex, and this then sets them up to get through the next part of the straight and through those chicanes nice and quickly. Drivers can utilise the inside curbs through the chicane, with the last right hand kink being the most important to hit in the right spot. If drivers approach that with too early of an apex, they exit too wide, and that then jeopardises their racing line for the next left hand turn. You want to turn in a little bit later so you can hug the right hand side of the track, and that then opens up the left hand turn before it goes up a hill. The key here is to lightly lock the brakes, but get on the gas nice and early to exit over that hill with a little bit more speed than your competitors. Once we've utilised the whole track, we start to go over a little crest, and now we're making our way into a long left hand sweeping corner. Not too much braking is required here. We want to try and use the long circumference of the corner to slow the speed down. And I found that using the inside curb actually helps rotate the kart and not flow the kart too wide in the middle of this turn. Using too much racetrack here is just not quick enough. So once we exit in the middle of the track, we start to move the kart towards 3/4 to full racetrack width as we go into the final two 180 degree switchback corners. Again, you can pass into these final two corners. I would try and pass into the left-hander rather than the last right-hand corner.
Back here at the Motorsports Country Club of Cincinnati, getting set to go for Masters Max qualifying again. Some on-track pickup in the Junior Max category was necessary after a couple of mechanical DNFs and one kart hitting the barrier. But we get set to go for the Masters, guys. Again, a separate class this weekend, thanks to decent numbers. It's going to be an interesting one for sure. We've seen 3 karts all weekend long that have had the pace drawn up at the front of the field. They have all been extremely competitive, as Florencio Mardan was the quickest in warm-up. Ray Banach has been quick throughout the weekend and very consistent with his lap times. And John Bonanno gets set to go aboard his J3 Comp kart. All 3 of them have been really quick and should be good threats for the pole position here, Justin.
Yeah, it can go either way or any direction, really, because when you have them all separated like they were in the practice that just happened within about 1 point, or rather, I should rather say a 10th and 3/4 just about, it's going to be very close amongst them. Right now, Mardan, I think, shown a lot of consistency so far between each session towards the top of the board so far. But overall, it's going to come down to what are they going to be able to do in the qualifying now that it's getting ready for the green here, now that they have 8 minutes to set the better times here, now that it's really go time if you want the early track position. We've seen the field naturally cycle in Masters. We've seen that in Colorado, for example, in the West Series. But the question's going to be, who's going to be the one dictating the tempo of the pace for the field to start things off today? We'll see.
Yeah, and again, in terms of track position here, not a huge difference because of the lack of, I guess, sheer karts to go through. You're probably not going to qualify outside the top 4 or 5 if you're among those top 3. But the confidence of being able to put it on pole, kind of the psychological game of being able to put yourself ahead of your direct competitors, that holds value. As you can hear actually on the audio, one of the karts waiting really late to go out. I think that's one of the benefits to this 8-minute session, is you can kind of space out when you go onto the racetrack. And you might see that a little bit in the senior max category later on. John Bonanno, though, sets up on his fast lap. Again, the excellent video by Dave Serra, really going into detail about where you need to go to be fast around this track. You can see him going just under the rubber. A lot of rubber has been laid down on this racetrack for the last week or two. And I mean, this is going to be a very important session. You can already see Bonanno off to a good start here.
Yeah, already a solid amount of separation, if anything, for the rest of the field. And we talk so much about draft in terms of straightaways. It's almost better sometimes, depending on the driver, to get some space on your own too, you can argue, because while you have that marker in front of you for the straightaways and for the slipstream for a qualifying run as the first time cycle on through here with Bonanno as expected to the tops to start things off here, it's still one of those where if you get held up in the corners, for example, that's where you can lose some time, or it could throw you off a little bit on your markers. So it's going to be an interesting one as this session now goes on, how these drivers adapt and run through as this progresses over the course of the next 5.5 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think John Bonanno has the right idea here, where it's kind of like when you have that kind of pace in your kart and you know that ultimately it's a three-man battle for the pole more than likely, just go get the laps together, put as much speed on the board as you can. Don't worry too much about the draft, because even if you get pipped out by someone, that has a better toe and a better draft, you're still going to be in the top 3. You're still likely going to have all the chance in the world to change up or to get your way back up through the field. And so those are just things to keep an eye on. I think that all of these guys in Masters pretty chill about understanding that ultimately they have the pace in their kart. And again, I mean, this track, it's one that I think has evolved quite a lot. The likes of Lorenzo Martin has a lot of laps all around this place over the course of the last 3 years, whether it be from USPKS last year, he's run the Route 66 Sprint Series whenever it's come to town. And in general, the Chicago native has a lot of experience around these sorts of Midwest tracks. But one thing that I want to point out is the amount of rubber that has been laid down the last couple of weeks between the test weekend for SCUSA for Spring Nationals, the Spring Nationals itself, and now the Mojo rubber that's been laid down here. Now, again, Mojo tires are a bit different in profile to what you'll see on the Evenco side of things. One of the big differences that you'll notice with them is normally in qualifying, the best laps are going to come early in the session, laps 2, 3, or 4, as we see Martin go to the top with a 57.486. But with the amount of rubber that's laid down on the Evencos, and with the more natural rubber that has been changed to for this 2024 compound on the Evencos, and a heavier amount of rubber, you can see the amount that's still there from last weekend. And again, the Mojo, a very sticky tire. We see lap times on the Mojos are not far off at all from what you would see on an MG Yellow. But when it comes to the grip and the amount that's laid down, it looks like the rubber will still have made a pretty big impact on the track evolution this weekend. So that's just something to keep an eye on. I think that it plays a factor in what Lorenzo Martin will be able to do. And I think that we've seen the track evolution not be quite as drastic as what it has been in weekends past, because they came into the weekend and the track was already so well gripped up. And so that's that. I think Martin on for a good qualifying right now. Banach and Bonanno all pretty close, but understanding how the rubber gets laid down, especially going from one compound to the other 2 weekends apart, is going to be critical here. And right now it looks like Martin has absolutely mastered it.
And interesting enough, that's also with weather in the forecast that was throughout the week, I should say, in the regions nearby. It's been where you can definitely see where it really sticks down in the midst of the darkness of the corners. And really the rubber helps keep things, in theory, gripped up to be able to hold on to the corners. Martin and Bonanno going back and forth yet again. Martin with that rubber up 3/10 nearly for the pole with 2 minutes to go in session.
Yeah, Laurencio Mordan has been absolutely rapid in this session on his Techno Kart. 57.174, that is a very quick time. Bonanno just set a 57.426 to go second. But I mean, these two guys, as well as Banach, really setting a good pace here. 57.1, only about a second and a bit off of what we saw Diego Ramos do on the senior side of things. And that's with significantly more weight on the kart. So for Martin to be at a 57.1 is very impressive. And I think with no draft either, there's no fluke about that lap. He has been consistently one of the quickest go-karts on the racetrack. And lap after lap, he's done what he needs to do to put himself in a very good situation for the races later on today. That lap through for Martin is a 57.3, and we are looking now at Martin again going out of turn number 3. Again, good run here for Laurencio Martin, and unless someone can put some magic on in the last couple minutes, it will be Martin on pole position.
And we've seen magic so far in this session so far. The trouble spot's going to be finding the magic wand, so to speak, when it comes to being able to find that after so many laps turned here, already the 5-6 laps. It seems almost that optimal window closes around lap 5. And after that point, it takes a lot of skill to be able to increase the speed. We've seen that already in the last class, that most teams set their best times by lap 3 or 4.
Yeah, again, most laps are going to be set on lap 3 or 4, maybe 5 like we saw in this one with Bonanno and Martin. But I think to get the most out of this Mojo tire compound, you have to be on it early on in qualifying, especially at a track which puts as much inertia through the tires as this Cincinnati track does. So, I mean, this has been a good session so far for Martin as they hit the checkered flag. It's been a good session for Bonanno and Banach. I think all three of them can work with what they have, but Laurencio Martin putting down a 57.174 was an absolute heater. And again, that's your top 3. Chris McGinley in 4th, just edging out Bo Amato in the 5th spot, and then Pop Clyde in the 6th spot with John Todd and Dallas Howe rounding out your field. So again, Masters Max qualifying in the books, and we now set our sights from the oldest guys to the youngest guys. It's the Micro and Mini Max classes coming up next here on Kart Chaser.
This is Henry. Henry feels sad. Henry feels sad because it's time for his next big race and his go-kart is in bits. Henry doesn't know that Acceleration Kart Racing is the United States' #1 shop for all of your karting equipment needs. Henry also doesn't know that Acceleration Kart Racing can deliver anything from tires to race suits and even wheels directly to your front door or to the racetrack itself, quickly and efficiently, with tech support available 6 days a week. Poor Henry doesn't even know that Acceleration Kart Racing offers free shipping to mainland USA on selected product if you spend $200 or more. Do yourself a favor. Go to accelerationkarting.com and make sure that you are never left stuck on the pre-grid with Henry. Be smart and don't be like Henry.
Are you looking for an advantage in your competition? Well, Kart Class has done the hard work for you. We've travelled to your racetracks to give you the inside knowledge. So what does Kart Class offer? We've got drone footage that captures the racing lines, visual markers for your braking points, acceleration zones, and the best overtake opportunities on your racetrack. Pedal cam to show you where to brake and when to accelerate, and 360-degree footage to make sure you don't miss any parts on the racetrack. We've covered 13 racetracks in the United States, and Australia, you're up next. So visit kartclass.com to get your track information.
Are you ready to get behind the wheel? From Formula One to NASCAR and IndyCar, all the pros start here. For more information, check us out online at mcckarting.com or call us and go racing today.
Karts are about to get rolling here for qualifying in the micro and the mini max categories. Again, this has been one of the more intriguing storylines to follow this weekend. An absolutely stacked field on the mini side of things. Ashton Woon coming off of 2 consecutive national race victories here at this exact same racetrack just 7 days ago. But he's going to have to do a lot of work here in mini max to beat out Renko Varela, who was rapid earlier on in warm-up and all day yesterday, and Nico Katowski as well. A lot of intriguing storylines here in this mini-max qualifying session. But Justin, as we get set to go for 8 minutes of more racing, this one should be set to be an absolute barn burner.
And we already seen that with how they went back and forth with the practice session so far. I think this is indeed going to be one where barns are definitely going to be burned, but better yet when it comes to the racing of itself. Ella, I should say, really set the tempo at the top of the session last time by near 3/10 over Katowski. Obviously, don't know if that's going to happen this session, because a lot of these drivers electing to stay grouped together here, try and find drafting partners as they begin the qualifying session to see, can they set the tempo and can they set it early? Holden Myers seems to say, I want to get the clean air first. A little bit of rumble strips there, a little bit of mistake off nearly to the grass to start off the qualifying run for the 136 kart.
A little bit of a mistake there, but he is able to overcome it. And as you can see now, again, this draft effect in the mini-max category, if we were talking about Masters where it might not have been worth it to try to get out draft, with how close it's been in mini, I think it will be essential if you want to get pole position to have a good draft. As you can see down the straightaway there, Holden Myers leading ahead of Achilles Saperko in the 2nd spot. So again, Achilles able to get a good draft here if he doesn't overdrive it, which, he just overdrove that a bit there. And that will actually bring him a little bit closer to Lucas Tarango behind him. But certainly these front running guys, Holden Myers, certainly a guy with a little bit of experience on the mini side of things, not a whole lot of experience around this racetrack, as he sets an early benchmark that immediately gets topped by Lucas Tarango with a 1:09.29. Again, Tarango's first venture into mini-max. He should be one to be pretty close to pole position, but again, it's a good run so far for Jeremy Sinclair in this first spot. Nico Katowski moves up to 2nd, just 6 thousandths behind him, and Ashton Woon and Renko Varela all pretty close to that pole position time as well so far.
And a lot of those drivers you mentioned there made the big point of stay in the main drafting groups here. You see these top 3, not a lot of slipstreams, so to speak. Then you get all the way past the hill crest where all of them are essentially grouped together. That 2nd group is essentially going to become the group to keep an eye on, I think, so to speak, when it comes to this qualifying. Tarango seems to be quick enough at least to close up a fair bit here to start the 2nd lap. He closed up 3-4 car lanes for the lap. But these drivers here, more cars, more draft in turn. Believe that we just had more time circulate to the 1:02.97 here real quickly. The times are picking up for that 3rd, 4th lap sweet spot.
Yeah, again, I think that we can see Tarango's kind of the one guy in this group, or in the top 6, that is not in that lead group. So I think that he's going to have to set up his draft a little bit more difficult, or with a little bit more difficulty than these other guys. There you can see just past for the second position on the racetrack, and he's got a long way to go to catch up to Holden Myers. And in a smaller class, maybe not as big of a deal, but with these guys all drafting together very well, that might be the difference between being up front and being down further in the grid. So there you can see Ashton Woon gonna drop out of line for a little bit to give himself a tow. So this next lap will be a throwaway lap for Ashton Woon. But again, Tarango, to me, is the guy to watch here because he's the one guy that doesn't really have an easy draftable range to work into. So for Jeremy Sinkir as well as Nico Katowski at the front of the field, they've already got a good lap on tow. For Ashton Woon, he's been kind of towing other guys around. So I think the next lap after this one should be the one where Woon has a chance, and we'll see if we can get him anywhere near Sinkir, Katowski, or Varela.
Starting to see some of the people even pass each other. You mentioned already playing the slipstream game so far here. We'll see where Woon goes the next time by. Not this time by. So, and again, the thought is simple when it comes to Woon in particular in this respective grouping. Try and get a triple tow amongst some of these drivers here. Same with what we're saying with St. Kiera right now. Try and draft off multiple karts. See if you can pick up the tempo and pull up the speed. Last time by, it was the quickest lap for Woon so far, a 1:4.26 after an initial drafting move. The team slipped back a little bit in the tow to start off the previous run.
Yeah, and again, I think that Woon, he got out of the gas so early that it probably meant that he didn't lose too much time on the second lap, but that still would have been compromised. It still would have compromised his run into turn one. So that 1:04 was super impressive for Ashton Woon, considering it was a throwaway lap. So I think this is going to be the lap for Woon. If there's a lap out there, it's not going to be perfect because he doesn't have a great draft down the main straightaway, but we'll see what he can do here. There you can see Connor Leipka up to fourth. That is a very good lap for the 1:44 machine up to fourth. And now De Janeiro to second with a 1:01. Katowski to fourth. And Ashton Woon up to fifth with a 1:02. So the top five within 2/10. Leipka, a very good run with a 1:03. And there you can see it's St. Clair's lap on lap number, St. Clair on lap number 3. Still good enough for the pole position. And actually his 3 best laps all would be quickest in the session so far.
Yeah, that kart seems to be very strong. Once again, another one of those from Canada that has experience recently, just a couple weeks ago, in fact, racing in Montreal, trying to compete and prepare for the Canadian Open over there. So things have been looking very strong and stellar so far. You also, remember, picked up some victories out at the Winter Trophy for RMC during the wintertime.
Yeah, St. Clair has been very good so far this season. Again, like you mentioned there, the Winter Series, you saw his pace really on display. So I think St. Clair, maybe not the household names that some of these guys on the U.S. side of things are to our audience, but Jeremy St. Clair is very good at what he does. But Enzo De Janeiro has moved up to second spot, and I think that De Janeiro's in a good spot drafting behind Ashton Woon now. They still need a little bit more time, though, and really, I think both of them are kind of in this weird spot where they're not getting a good toe lap. They're just pushing each other, which has value. Will give you extra time, but it won't give you quite as much time as a 3 to 4 kart length draft would, to where you can kind of pull up to the guy that's right in front of you and get that extra toe effect. So again, we'll see how De Janeiro and Woon goes through this time. They're coming to the checkered flag this time around. All of them going to pull in, though, and I think that this is going to be pretty much the end of the session. There you see Woon, De Janeiro, as well as Katowski all pulling into the pits. And I think technically there's a couple more that still could finish their lap in the micro side of things, but for Jeremy St. Clair, a very good lap to put himself on pole position.
Blistering quick from the get-go and position himself perfectly for the draft all the way from the start, whether it was the first lap, the second lap, or third lap, or basically each lap was made sure he wasn't the lead kart for the most part, and that obviously seems to be the winning strategy for this class, as you talked about. Some other drivers finishing up their laps towards the back grouping. Micro, by the way, Jack Katowski, oh my goodness, Katowski ended up having the best run there.
Yeah, Jack Katowski, a very good run for him. Again, ahead of Slate Harrell in the 12th spot by about less than a tenth of a second. So those two in micro in their own subdivision should have a very good battle coming up next. And you can see there, Anthony Mazzucchello rounds out that field, only about 3/10 off. So should be a good race in micro, but at the front of the field in mini, Jeremy Sakir able to come away with the pole position ahead of Enzo De Janeiro, Renko Varela, Nico Katowski, Ashton Woon, Connor Lepka, Holden Myers, Lucas Tarango, Achilles Spirko, and Cole Vetter as well. So a very close field through the top 8 in mini, a very close field in micro, and we're about to see some good racing for these guys later on today. But now we turn our focus to the headline division of the weekend, the Senior Max category, where we'll see if anyone can stop Diego Ramos, who had an incredible warm-up session earlier on in the day here, Justin.
Yeah, blistering quick from the onset. We talked about it yesterday. Today it's going to be an intense one for this grouping of drivers pretty soon, especially with Ramos being up to half a second quicker. Him and his teammate in Pernod, half a second quicker than the rest of the field. That is blisteringly quick for a practice. Does that hold up in qualifying? Not quite sure on that. Does that say a lot for what to expect for them for the race week? Potentially, with what they were able to satisfy to start off the practice sessions and in turn start off today into the Saturday.
Yeah, and again, it's something we mentioned earlier on air. The ability to be fast on warm-up. Normally, you wouldn't think too much about it, but for Diego Ramos, he's doing that time at a time of day that's not going to be too terribly far from when he has his final later on in the weekend tomorrow. So that's encouraging for Ramos. It's identical amount of time for this session compared to the warm-ups. So if they set the tire pressure pretty similar, or at least close with the new tire compound, they should be pretty quick here in this session. And it will be up to the likes of Oliver Hodgson, Timothy Pernod, as well as some of the guys further down the order like Cooper O'Clair, or maybe even someone like Zachary Clemendomelo to try to find that last bit of pace that they're missing to catch up to Diego Ramos in the red PSL machine.
And really, the main thing to say really on that, Mark, is we'll know how things are going to go once the racing gets itself going, right? And know how simple that may sound, but it's been an intense grouping of drivers here in terms of some of these practice sessions. Hodgson in particular, I think, is going to be an interesting one with him being so quick on his own. How is he going to fare out once the racecraft comes into play? And better yet, once the racing comes to, the racing side of things later on today. I think that's the big thing. But it's also going to be critical for Hodgson to qualify in a similar grouping as before to be able to have a chance to be able to showcase that pace compared to having to duke it out battle-wise in, say, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th position in a field that's about 17, 19 carts deep.
Yeah, and I think for Hodgson, too, this is going to be very important, if not for a track position side of things. I mean, as long as he qualifies in the top 6 or 7, he can work with that, but more so to make a step forward. Because if you're 4/10 off the pace, it's hard to win races. If you're a 10th or 2, it's still possible. And so I think that big difference that we saw in the warm-up session can't really happen here if he wants any shot at a race victory. But again, with how stacked this Senior Max field is, I expect that we'll see someone like Hodgson to try to put it to Diego Ramos, or at least see if he can't get closer and make it a race later on today.
Some interesting choices, though, for the groupings. You mentioned with it being 8 minutes, drivers can have their choice on when to go out. Half the field, or at least a good third of it, said, let's go out right now. The green flag's out. Why not go? And the rest of the field is still yet to come out of that pit lane below where that camera shot was. A lot of these drivers are saying, let's see how things go of half a track back to these drivers. There's the other half.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be, again, kind of a follow the leader type of deal. With Ramos coming out late, it kind of incentivizes that second group to want to follow him. But a lot of other guys are like, hey, let's just get clean air, let's do the best that we can, and we'll worry about how we stack up with those guys later on in the session. So I think it's a good move for someone to follow Diego, but I think that it makes sense as to why you might want to just go out there on your own and try to get clean laps in. So Ramos leading a train of about 8 go-karts now, or 7 go-karts all the way down. There you see Austin Olds in that group. You can see Zachary Clemente, and further down the likes of Ben Hernandez and Yasser Paul also in that group as well. So again, this is going to be interesting to see, and we'll see if they can hang on to the Red Army and the 2 Burrell Arts.
Yeah, and that we've seen pretty difficult to do in the practice, but now this is the true test right now. Again, Ramos seems to be pretty much in full control mode, helping Pernod, helping him break away. They've already pulled away 4 or 5 kart lanes already this lap. That says a little bit there with how much they're trying to build and run away. In fact, this pack is already splintered into small packs already.
Yeah, again, this is just the pace that we've seen Ramos and Pernod have today. Just so much speed, especially in the second half of the lap, too. You can see ZCD trying to keep up with him, but it's just not happening for him so far. Already a 56-1 for Diego Ramos, only about 4/10 off of his best lap from warm-up. So those two in first and second, then Lorenko and Wes Gundler in third and fourth. They've opted to go out by themselves, as you can see them going through the sweeper right now. And you can see Lorenko leading ahead of Gundler. Aiden Fox is in that group as well. So the 3 of them, the 3 Fox and Sun Industries, all trying their own separate strategy. And I think Oliver Hodgson and Cooper Auclair are kind of on their own as well. So there's a lot of different ideas being thrown around here, but at the front of the field, Cooper Auclair just reset fast time on his first hot lap at 56.066, just marginally quicker than Oliver Hodgson.
Yeah, just about a 10th quicker than the Red Army machines we've seen so far. You can already see them trying to get the heads down for the slipstream of their respective pack, and a change again for the second lap. How about near a full 4/10 quicker for those drivers in that second strategy pack? Ramos and Pernod already increasing their time significantly.
Yeah, but here's going to be the key part as we come down the main straightaway. Hodgson and Auclair for their second lap. This will give us a 1-to-1 comparison, and they slot right in between the 2 Burrell Arts. You can see Oliver Hodgson into the second spot, into the third spot, Cooper Auclair into the second spot, 55.8 versus a 55.9. And then Pernod right at the edge of the 55.9 as well. So the top 4 close together, but they are on completely different terms on the racetrack. This should be a good lap for Pernod, though. He's gotten a little bit closer to Diego Ramos this time through. As they come down the main straightaway, we'll see what they can do this time through for Ramos. Any improvement coming to the line? Not any quicker for Diego, but it is a quicker lap for Timothy Pernod. 55.802. Just a little bit quicker than Cooper Auclair, and now the top 3 are separated by only 54/1,000ths of a second.
Razor thin margins, and here we go again with Auclair and Hodgson trying to go blow to blow. This is going to be their third laps here, and this is the sweet spot we already talked about a lot. Auclair, how about that? Another couple hundreds quicker for the top spot on the pylon.
Yeah, Cooper Auclair found that extra 10th there. There's one kart around in the back section there through the sweeper, and there's the 2 PSL guys. Now, what will they do here as they get back on the racing line? Will they do a cool down lap, as it looks like they might be getting in the way there of one of the J3 competition machines, but are they going to try here to cool the tires down and then go for another push-up, or is this Diego saying, okay, this is all I've gotten out of the kart? No, they're going to go a deliberate cool-down lap here from Diego Ramos and Timothy Pernod. Interesting. This is something that we see from time to time, depending on the tire compound. The Mojos, to be completely honest with you, Justin, I have not had the track time to be able to tell you exactly how it works in terms of the cooling down and then bringing him back to life on the next lap. But certain compounds, like, for example, an Evenco Blue, you can do this and slow down about 5 to 10 seconds on a lap, and it brings the tires back into the right working temperature. So Ramos and Pernod, we mentioned they did this in the warm-up in the warm-up session earlier, but for them to do this now, they must think that it worked earlier, and they're going to try to cool it down a little bit, give themselves one last crack at pole position with about a minute and 50 seconds left in the session. They'll get one, maybe two more good laps. And so for Ramos and Pernod, a deliberate strategy to slow down and see if they can recharge the batteries a little bit, cool the tires down, and give it one last go for pole position.
Well, they did the exact same thing in the practice session, the final practice rather. So it's not a surprise that they try it now. They tested it out before, and it is a strat we've seen play out for a couple more tenths we've seen from their practice times earlier on today. So now this is going to be full push, push, push. They don't have anyone else around them to be able to tamper with themselves. It's down to each other to try push each other for the tempo. They do have Auclair and Hodgson. We're about 20 car lengths back within them to potentially keep an eye on 2 with a minute to go on the clock.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because it's also a little bit of a driver variance too. It takes a little bit to get your eye kind of back sighted on to the track and understand what's quick versus what's not. Ramos though down the mountain straight away, a good tuck here. We'll see if this is any quicker for him. Ramos coming to the line now. It's a 55.730. He has tied Cooper Auclair's lap time down to the 1,000th, the 55.730 for Auclair. By virtue of setting the lap first, he gets the tiebreaker over Ramos, and now Ramos is going to have one more crack at it, one more chance to break that tie and put himself on pole. Pernod marginally slower on that last lap than what he was able to do early in the session. So if Pernod wants any shot at it, he's got to pick up a little bit more to Ramos and Auclair. But Auclair's lap number 3 still hanging on, even if it's just off of a technicality.
Yeah, razor thin for the qualifying right now, obviously. Now you can see how much pace in particular it looks like Ramos has really pushed this lap. They are picking up a little bit of slipstream off some of the draft from the traffic. Where will the time fly? It looks like one will back out, one will go for it, and Ramos top of the board.
Yeah, Ramos there on the last lap found that extra 10th. And so the strategy to cool off the tires, give him one last crack at it, has worked to perfection here. There's Gavin Bailiff, who feels like he's been a bit down on power this weekend. Going to try everything he can for one last push lap to see if he can get further up. Currently, he's in 12th. We'll see not any quicker that time through. Chris Harrower can improve. And Diego Ramos, after being in a dogfight all session long, looks like he has put himself on pole position for the Senior Max category, ahead of Cooper Auclair, Timothy Pernod, and Oliver Hodgson. It is PSL 1, J3 2, PSL 3, J3 4 in the 4th spot, and Zachary Clement de Mello, as always, there to spice things up in the 5th position.
And how about Kakati? We talked about him throughout this broadcast a bit from the west side. He comes away 6th, had a transponder issue in the final practice, hence why he wasn't classified then. Hernandez, Gunler, Fox, and Olds amongst that top 10. Half a second, just about the difference between them, but look at some of the intervals between some of those carts within that top 10 or so. Some of them within a couple of thousandths in their separation. The pack's going to be massively wound together when we go racing here. And that doesn't get to where a lot of those 11th on back, they're going to need a lot of pick-me-up, but we already know we've seen the pick-me-up come from the speed from them over the course of the year so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's a close field in the top 5. It's a close field in the midfield. And I think we're going to see a lot of good racing in Senior Max. Again, 2 heat races coming up later today and the pre-final. All of them will give these guys a chance to move up through the field. But again, Diego Ramos, Cooper Auclair at the front of the field. Pernod, Hodgson, de Mello, Gacati, Hernandez, Gunwer, Fox, and Olds. Gunwer ended up the highest of the guys on that alternate strategy of going out right away in the 8th spot. So can't say it worked out too well for him. But again, Senior Max, a lot of fast drivers, a lot of good names. This should be a really exciting race. But that will come on later in the day as we look at the last couple classified finishers. Ben Lida, Nick Mercer, and Brian Bohos. So qualifying and warm-up in the books. We'll take a look at the schedule one more time here as we get set to go for the rest of the day. Heat 1, Heat 2, and the pre-finals will be behind the paywall on the KC Premium member side of things. So if you haven't already, join the KC Nation today and you'll have the premium member access. So again, this one gonna come up next. Heat 1, Heat 2, and the pre-finals will be on a separate stream that we'll switch over to in a minute. But again, a strong morning so far for warm-up and qualifying. We've got a lot of exciting racing coming up later today, live on Kart Chaser. If you're a KC Premium member, get ready to watch later on today, and we will get set to go for round number 1 of the U.S. Trophy East here at the Motorsports Country Club of Cincinnati.